Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see all of you. And this is our webinar series for the Bench with Bedside Initiative and the Norris Comprehensive Cancer Center to bring to our Eileen McGeever breast cancer survivorship participants important information and topics of interest. We try to, cover a wide range of topics that would be of interest to women who are breast cancer survivors. Another thing that I might ask each of you to do is just put in the number of years you have been, survivor in breast cancer, and we're very happy to have you here and be a part of our study. Just a couple of updates about our study for you. First of all, if you didn't know, Dr. Caryn Lerman is the co-PI on the study with myself, and the Norris Comprehensive Cancer Center has been, the force behind this program, and so we're all very grateful. We have about 750 participants to date that have enrolled. And there's always like some gaps, as you know, it takes time to collect blood and whatever. But we've collected data from over 500 women now on the study, and there's a couple of hundred that sort of like we're waiting for various things. On that note, I can't impress upon you enough how important it is for our study and the success of our study that you do what you can to, stay on, like to do your annual check-ins and with your blood samples and your surveys, but also we check in every 6 months just to make sure everybody's doing well. And just to remind everybody, the focus of the study is to, to study survivorship and factors that impact long-term survivorship. And so these data from you are very important, but we're so grateful for your participation. You are definitely like warriors in this study with us, and we're so happy and grateful to you. So without further delay, I'm going to introduce Dr. Caryn Lerman. It's going to take a few minutes because she has a lot that I have to say about her because she's
Oh, no, you don't have to say it.
very accomplished. So she's first of all the director of the Norris Comprehensive Cancer Center. She's been with us for about 7 years at USC, leading the cancer center, and it's been an amazing journey with Dr. Lerman. She is also a distinguished professor in the Department of Psychology and is the H. Leslie and Elaine S. Hoffman Cancer Research Chair at the Keck School of Medicine. She's also an elected um, member of the National Academy of Medicine and has served as a member of the NCI Board of Directors and has been very active in the national space and has also been the president of the ad, of the Association of American Cancer Institutes. She's also a clinical psychologist, which is what brings her to us today in part because that's her passion. She's a recognized leader in also cancer prevention research, and she bridges the field of neuroscience and genomics and pharmacology and population sciences, and has been a major unifying force in research that studies biology that drives science to reduce cancer risk behaviors. And this work has spawned novel lines of investigations around behavioral epidemiology and cancer genetic susceptibility. She has been done some important work on genetic influences in nicotine addiction and cancer prevention, and she's published over 400 peer-reviewed papers as she sort of transitioning in her career, and I'll let Caryn talk to you about that. Today, she is very interested now in psilocybin research and the effects of other psychedelic therapies. Um, but on top of all of that, she's loves hiking and traveling, and as a dog lover, and spends time with her husband Troy and Darwin and Floki, and those are the loves of her life. And with that, I will pass it on to you, Caryn, to just say a few words before we start. This is a conversation today. We're going to talk about, life after cancer from the perspective of from clinical psychology and just real world um, things that we all have to go through when we suffer from cancer and what it means to be resilient after that. So with that, thank you so much, Dr. Lerman, for being here with us. And I am going to let you say a few words to the group, and then we'll get going.
Great. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. And thanks, Dr. Salhia, for your leadership of the Bench with Bedside initiative, which is, as we can see, reaching out to women across the country and having a big impact through the information that you share, the research that you do, and all to promote survivorship, not just length of life, but quality of life. And that's really important. So, as Bodor alluded to, I am in the process of my own career transition where after over 40 years, working in academia and about 20 of those, half of those years being in kind of academic leadership, executive type roles, I've decided to step back from administration and return to my passion projects. And one of those is returning to my roots as a clinical psychologist and working with breast cancer survivors and other cancer survivors to really to bring the space to begin to both think about and develop intentional plans for life after cancer treatment ends. And that's the kind of the conversation that Bodor and I will have about that, and excited to share with you. But really importantly, and we want to keep the our question and answer period rather short because I would absolutely love to hear from all of you on some related to some of the themes that we've talked about and what has been helpful for you. What do you see as the remaining needs that are not being addressed by the healthcare system? And I will preface this by saying a couple of things about cancer and about how we work with people who have completed cancer treatment. Um, I think, and this is my opinion, and I'm not speaking for USC right now, okay? But the medical establishment is, you know, quite
Yes.
good at addressing the medical needs of cancer patients. And, there's obviously a wide degree of variability in quality of care. But where I do see a gap when it comes to survivorship is after treatment ends, right? So there's surveillance plans, there's come back and be screened this often. And then those surveillance appointments become spaced out farther and farther. And there are then periods of time, and particularly within the few years after cancer treatment ends, that can be filled with a great deal of uncertainty, and a great deal of questioning because we know cancer strips a lot away, right? And we'll talk about some of the specifics, but there's changes in identity, changes how we see ourselves, how we believe other people perceive us. It can alter our ability or how we consider our priorities for how we want to spend our time. But there might be reasons why people don't go back to the same professional work that they may have been doing. Maybe it's because of energy level, or maybe it's just because priorities have changed. But the broad theme of what we will talk about is how to really understand changes in identity that came with cancer as a foundational state to then move into thinking, how do we derive meaning from the experience? And then how do we share that experience as wisdom? How do we live our lives more intentionally after cancer, recognizing that priorities have changed and how we spend our time may have changed? And so Bodor will have some questions to ask, and then we'll open it up for questions. But again, as I said, would love to hear from you guys because that's how we learn is from your voices. So your voices are really critical to our ability to meet what we think are unmet needs that occur, psychological, existential, etc. And that's really the theme of today rather than medical care needs. And
Yeah,
with
thank you.
that, I will pass it back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's perfect. And it's a really important point to make that, as scientists in the field, for the work that we do to be truly translational, we have to be able to solve problems that need to be solved. And sometimes, when you're not on the front line, you don't always know what those problems are. And as scientists, we're curious about all aspects of science oftentimes, but that's why it's really important to collaborate, not just with physicians and other scientists, but also with the primary consumers of this sort of problem. And so this is why we really would love to hear your feedback as well about what are some of your needs. But with that, I want to ask you a question, Caryn. So recognizing that everyone's breast cancer journey is different, what common themes have you identified in your research and in your practice as a clinical psychologist?
Thank you. There's,
Recording in progress.
So there are some common themes that psychologists have identified, and some of this work comes out of philosophy as well. I'm not going to get into the details, but happy to elaborate as we go on in terms of the details of the research specifically. But the commonalities, I would say, one is the phases, really goes back to the phases of a transition. And what I'm going to talk about isn't just about the phases of a transition caused by a diagnosis of cancer, but there are theories and practices applied to any life changes that affect our identity, our meaning, our sense of purpose, and where we need to adapt to some major life event. So that life event could be a divorce, it could be a change in job, it could be a diagnosis of chronic illness, a diagnosis of cancer. And generally, the research shows, the psychological research across many conditions, including cancer, that there are really three overall phases of a transition like this. So if you think about the first phase as it relates to cancer, this is a phase where there's loss, there's grief, just, grieving the person you are, the things that you might not be able to do during that treatment phase. But it's also a phase where people are just very focused on, these are the dates that I'm going for my treatment. These are the effects I can expect, but very much a focus on just kind of doing what has to be done during that phase without sometimes a whole lot of processing of the experience at that time. Where the processing of the experience comes in the second phase, once treatment's finished, and so you're not focused on surviving, but then the processing of what the experience has led you to feel, how it has changed your relationships, how it has changed your identity, and so forth. That processing begins in the second phase. And we often refer to that second phase as a messy middle or a liminal space. Liminal meaning an in-between space, right? Because you you might ring the bell and your doctors say no evidence of disease, but of course we know for so many people and for so many women with breast cancer in particular, the real question in your mind is this going to come back, right? And so during that messy middle phase, that's a time where there's uncertainty, there can be anxiety, there can be fear, changes in the dynamic with patient and caregiver. We can talk more about that if people are interested, but it's a time to really begin to sort out, how am I different now versus before cancer? What do I want more of? What do I want less of? And how do I begin to create that intentional plan? And that's really the third phase. And the third phase is the new beginning, which is the start, of a survivorship journey, but with intentional planning and a sense of purpose that either may not have existed before cancer or a sense of purpose that has changed. So I'll just give you an example with, from different patients and people we've interacted with. So it might be the person who had a super high-powered job, regretted not spending enough time with family, who changes things professionally, during that second or third phase because the priorities have changed. And it may, I've had people say, I realized that, for all the working I was doing, um, what's really important to me now is spending more time with family and friends. Other examples are examples of someone who says, a teacher who says, I can't keep up with that. I don't have the energy that I used to have. And, this no longer feels like the right fit for me. And thinking of a survivor who then went on and became a patient advocate because that was what gave her purpose, was to be able to share and give back the wisdom that she gained through the process. So those are examples there. So the three phases. But the other piece of this is that the areas, the broad areas of change with a diagnosis of cancer. And the extent of this change depends on often on which phase somebody's in. So, for example, you have like during treatment in particular, the physical changes, whether it's hair loss, whether it's fatigue, energy, difficulty sleeping, whether it's surgical changes that affect body image. Okay. Um, you have the psychological changes of adapting, beginning to recognize a change in identity from somebody who was disease-free to somebody who now has cancer and so forth. The professional changes. So we think of this as the six Ps. So the physical changes, the psychological, the professional, like the examples I gave, and one P that's called passing. It doesn't mean that we're passing. It means sort of grieving the loss of maybe who you were before cancer. And the most important one is purpose, which is identifying a new sense of purpose or doubling down on a purpose that you had before, but having more clarity about purpose. So those are some common themes in terms of broad areas of impact that occur during the three really phases after a cancer diagnosis from a psychological perspective.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Thank you for that, Karen, sort of breaking it down in a scientific way almost of just these phases of transition and I don't know, if everybody here knows, I've mentioned it before at previous webinars, but of course, I'm a cancer survivor myself. I had multiple myeloma. And as you were talking, I was remembering that first phase, and it was how hard it was. It still triggers me till today. You'll have to forgive me if I actually start crying about it like right now, because it's always triggering. But I do remember at some point, it's just about survival at that point. It's just getting through it. You don't even have time to really comprehend what actually happened because you just have to get through it. You have to get through the treatment, and then when you're done treatment, and when you're done the core of your treatment, and I would imagine many of the women here today would know what I'm talking about. You're not really done all treatment yet. You're sort of phase out of it, and so you're starting with this like very intensive period of treatment and then that as the cycles and as the regiment sort of comes to an end maybe a less aggressive regimen begins and then they just assess but I do also kind of fast forwarding without going through all of these phases is just how intentional you have to be to work on yourself again. And it's a lot of hard work to kind of get back to baseline. And I don't know that you ever do get back to baseline, but um, it's very, very hard work and it has to be very intentional. And one of the things, and this is science on the science of aging and cancer, and I don't mean aging in terms of our chronological age, but our fitness, our cellular age, our cellular fitness, is that is one of the biggest predictors of sort of good outcome in the end, is that just bringing your fitness back, your cellular fitness back. And that doesn't just mean, running a marathon. It means just, coming back to your routine, being able to walk to get things and being able to climb a set of stairs and being able to put effort into, doing your hair and like it's all hard work after cancer. So I recognized all of those phases when you were speaking. So thank you. I don't know if other people want to share anything about their phases. And we'll certainly have time at the end because as we said, we want to hear your thoughts. But um, do I see any hands up?
Ooh,
Okay.
any hands up? All right, we can keep going and then
Yeah, we can
pause
come
a
back. We
bit.
can come back. Um, so with that then, Karen, in all these phases, can you tell us some of the ways that um, we can explore, uh, our own changing identities? Like how do we explore, our evolving self after cancer? It's a very
Hmm.
complicated topic.
Yes, and I'll talk about some types of exercises and some things that people have reported as helpful and exercises we use in workshops that specifically address these issues. Of course, a big part of anything I'll talk about is the sharing component of it, which we won't get to dive in and do today. But for example, um, you know, some of you, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of like mapping your journey. And what I mean by that is starting at the time of diagnosis and actually starting by drawing a line and a line in the middle of the page. And above the line were positive experiences and below the line were negative experiences. And so you line across the page and you might talk about, diagnosis. That was really low, but then treatment ended. And then you see a hill and end up seeing hills and valleys. And then you add on to that, you layer onto that specific changes. What helped you be at a better place after you had a dip in terms of your your mood, your sadness, whatever was going on, and really just mapping out what that period has looked like in terms of who was involved, who was helpful, and so forth. That's often a starting place. In terms of the identity mapping, we often start with microjournaling about who was I before cancer? What were the things that were most important to me? What were my top three personal values? And then doing something similar for after cancer or after treatment. And then what we do is we work with people, we have people pair off and then compare and ask specific questions to each other with probes to really help people focus in on what has changed, what is different. And it may seem very obvious and simplistic, but the fact is, we rarely take the space and in a kind of a supportive environment with others who understand where we're coming from, to really process these things. And I'm not even talking about like seeing a therapist every week or once a month. I'm really talking about having some space in, over a number of days to really look at these things. And so a lot of this happens through conversation, through people sharing. And this might be a good pausing point because I know we want to talk about purpose and, redefining purpose because that's ultimately what it's about. But I would love to hear if there is anybody who's comfortable sharing in this confidential group, what have you noticed about identity before versus after cancer? And it may relate to those 6 Ps that we talked about. But I'd love to hear anything about identity before and after identity that um, anybody might be willing to share.
On that note, Karen, there's a question from
Oh, okay.
Dana about what is the
Mhm.
sixth P? So physical, psychological, professional, passing purpose, and there's one more.
Yes, there is. I'll come back. I'll come back to you on that. We'll get back to you on that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like blocking my brain at the moment. Professional, best friend. Yeah, we'll get back to you on that one. Good question. Thanks for pointing that out.
But yeah,
What's
who
okay, what's missing from the five that I listed? It can be a P or not a P. What are some of the impacts? Who's going to be brave and start us off? It can be either, an area of impact or a before and after identity. Now, normally we would have you like microjournal for 5 minutes first so I'm kind of asking for feedback before you've had the processing time, but if some of you would have thought through this. Deborah?
oh, wait,
Oh, we
you're on
can't hear
mute.
you. Yeah. We
You're
have to unmute you. Okay. Hello? Oh,
no,
we still can't hear Deborah.
she's not
I don't
muted
know if
though.
your audio is
How's that?
There you go.
great. Yay.
Great. Well, thank you first, both of you. I would say I'm 1 year out from breast cancer diagnosis, and I'm a nurse, uh, and I just wanted. I'm blessed to have I guess, a more positive diagnosis. I'm older, stage 1A. I decided I wanted a bilateral mastectomy. I have one of the best surgeons in the countries in Louisiana, where I'm from.
Mhm.
The outcome is good, but I'm surprised how psychologically uh, this has affected me.
Mhm.
And I'm also surprised that I have a great oncologist. I had great surgeons, but nobody really mentions the psychological part.
I know,
So
right?
I'm on my own, and I feel lucky. I know how to nurses talk to each other, and I know how to ferret out who a good psychologist would be or counselor. But I guess I'm
Hmm.
just kind of in the first stage, I would say, trying to come to
Hmm.
grips with this a year
Hmm.
later, and I'm surprised about the psychological and the body image impact.
Hmm.
Not that it would make me go back and only have a lumpectomy versus bilateral mastectomy, but I know I have to talk this out or I'm going to
Hmm.
just be stuck. So,
Hmm.
anyway,
Hmm.
I wanted
So
to share.
it's really a gap that our healthcare systems do not do a great job of
Yeah,
addressing, right?
right.
So
Thank you.
what you're saying is very, very common, and we can follow up with some um like what's available are like national support groups and so forth. Um, there are people who are specialists in different regions of the country in working with cancer patients or working with people after they're finished with cancer treatment. Um, what the physicians, the primary physician should be doing is, and sometimes you just have to ask, having a referral to somebody whose passion and work is focused on working with people with cancer. But happy to follow up with some resources also for everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, that
Thanks
would
for
be great.
sharing.
We'll get that out to everybody in an email as a follow-up with the sixth P, Karen, with the sixth P.
Yeah, with the 6P.
Um, okay, anybody else willing to sort of talk about some of the impact that cancer has had on them?
Um, I'm here. I don't have the camera, but
No
I don't know
problem.
if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'm the one that's, I think, 15 years ago.
Mhm.
And I noticed that. So during the year, I lived my nice, happy life. You're going on with living. However, when that annual, gosh, I hope I don't get emotional here, but
It's okay if
when
you
you use,
do. Yeah.
yeah, when you use the word trigger, oh my gosh, it really,
Yeah.
it does trigger. You're back in that room. And so when I
Mhm.
go once a year for the mammogram, ultrasound, you're in that room and you're waiting for those results. And boy, it doesn't matter how many years ago it was, you are right back at that first time. And I was diagnosed with triple negative. So,
Mm.
you just have that thing looming. Oh my gosh, is it going to show up in another place? And uh, yeah, so
Mhm.
it's that kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. I guess that's the best way to say it. Yeah,
Right.
you're never really, I hate to say this because I'm looking at the chats and so many people are a year out, 2 years out, 4 years out, and I'm thinking I should not, I kind of debated whether or not to even share this because you want people to continue having their hope and their dreams. And okay, one day I'm not going to be worried about this, thinking about it. But for me personally, and that's true during the year, but then, gosh darn, you're back in that room waiting for the test results. And it just sometimes it does get overwhelming, and so you have to really kind of pray so that you kind of face that fear and that anxiety and not go down that rabbit hole and just okay, it's whatever it is, we'll get through this. So
Hmm.
okay.
And what you're sharing, Diana, is very common. And people also report that that anxiety starts maybe a month before or even more so, like that the appointment's coming up, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And and that might and that's it might never go away. That sense of because the follow-up tests there's always going to be some amount of anxiety. So it's learning to adapt to that and learning some strategies to just reduce it, whether it's deep breathing, whether it's distraction or things like that. But what you're reporting is common and it's not related to time since diagnosis. Yeah, it's just a common reaction for people. And I have not had breast cancer. Every time I go for my mammogram, I even experience some anxiety. Will I have breast cancer when I'm waiting for the results? So it's a very natural thing. Really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. That actually hit home for me when you said that. I can completely relate. I think Karen,
Corinne. Yeah. Is it Corinne or Karen?
yeah.
It's Caryn. My parents
Karen.
had to do the unusual spelling.
Me too.
I get that every doctor's appointment. Is it Karen or Karen?
I thought about starting to call myself Corinne just because Karen's got a bad rap. But
I know. There's
anyway.
that too. It just only gets worse.
Yeah.
So, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, and I feel like UW Health Oncology did a pretty good job. I had the complicating factor that I was diagnosed in January of 2020. So I went through most of my heavy chemo right when everything shut down for COVID.
Right.
So, I couldn't have any visitors and that sort of thing. And it was very complicated to get extra appointments. But they did offer the oncology psychologist there. And so I
Hmm.
had, I don't know, maybe six or so visits with her, and it could only be online at first. And then I met her a couple times, like maybe over the course of a year or so. I can't honestly remember.
Hmm.
And I thought that was good. She helped me kind of realize I was diagnosed at stage 3B. And so
Hmm.
one of the most useful things she did is she drew a diagram, kind of like a branching tree. And she said, well, what you're doing is like these are all the different paths your life could take. And what you're doing is, and then she covered up like most of the tree. And she said, this is what you're doing. You're assuming that you don't have any more of this.
Hmm.
Like, 'cause I was kind of assuming I wasn't going to survive, that I was going
Hmm.
to go to stage 4. But so I got through really heavy chemo and radiation, and I opted for a lumpectomy. I have triple positive, had triple positive. And so, but one thing that was really the counseling appointments were helpful, but I did kind of feel like she was trying to hustle me along. Like they only wanted the most severely depressed people in crisis to be
See,
actually
that's
getting
the
the
medical
appointments.
model. Yeah. And not
Yeah.
addressing the longer term psychological and existential issues,
Oh.
meaning, what does this mean for my future? How might I want to change my future? If
Hmm.
my time might be more limited than I thought, maybe it won't be, but we don't do a good
Hmm.
job of that in healthcare.
Yeah, and another thing that was very jarring is after I did my heavy chemo and I did radiation and I was starting to feel physically better, they put me into a survivorship appointment.
Hmm.
And it was very jarring at that point because I was definitely still in the first phase that you were talking about,
Hmm.
where I still felt
Hmm.
like I was in treatment. And also because I had HER2 positive breast cancer, I was continuing on my same every 3 week infusion
Hmm.
schedule with a different drug with Herceptin for almost another year. So my visit schedule wasn't changing at all, but they were kind of acting like, oh, congratulations, you're a survivor now, even though nothing had
It
really,
didn't feel that way inside, though. Yeah.
no. And so I
Yeah.
think it would have been better if they had put that survivorship visit after I was done with all those
Yes.
infusions a year
Yeah.
later and had my port taken out, because that
Yeah.
felt like, transitioning to just taking the oral aromatase inhibitor. So, and I'm at another milestone now where I just finished 5 years of an anastrozole, and I was really hoping to be done with it, but they're
Hmm.
pushing for me to stay on it for 7 to 10 years. So,
Hmm.
um, but I do feel kind of stuck right now between phase 2 and 3, basically. And I'm
Hmm.
looking for a counselor right now, and I'm not having very good luck with availability where I'm living. I'm only able to get an appointment every couple of months.
Hmm.
And uh,
Um, I may be able to help you identify someone locally. I believe there's a new cancer center director there. I knew the other one, but I'll look it up and we'll see what we can find out. Um, and it is important, and we'll share information also about a f- a 4.5 day workshop in New Mexico that's going to be specifically for people living with cancer that's dedicated to these issues. And um, we'll send that information out. And I'm leading that workshop with uh, a man named Chip Conley, who is dealing himself with prostate cancer. He's the founder, he's an entrepreneur who was a hotel person, and he sold all his hotels and decided he wanted to found a wisdom school, a school for people going through transitions to help people go through transitions. And this is the first workshop for people with cancer. It's a cancer thrivers workshop that he and I will co-lead. And sometimes it's not, I went to one of their workshops. It's called the Modern Elder Academy. If anybody's ever heard of it, they have a site in Baja and a site in Santa Fe. And it's really dedicated to giving people that space. And I found that it's one thing to see somebody regularly, but what a gift to have like 4 or 5 days to just really dive in, go inside and be with people going through similar things. So there's different options that we'll share for people. Thanks for sharing, Caryn.
Yeah, thank you,
I
Caryn.
found the 6P. So it's really the first P, and it's personal, which is how has your sense of identity, how you see yourself or believe others see you shifted since diagnosis. And then the physical we talked about, the psychological, the professional, the passing, what are you letting go of or grieving, and then the purpose. May?
Hi.
Hi.
Um, so you're bringing, okay, so I didn't even know about this until 1 minute before I saw the email pop up and I was like, oh, let me join this because I've never done anything in terms of following up or participating in a group or anything about my cancer journey. Um, Breast cancer was my second cancer. I had a first one in 2015. It was thyroid cancer. And at that time, I chose to leave my full-time job because I was driving 2.5 hours a day and working 40 hours a week in like a high highly intensive kind of job. So I switched to part-time ever since. And then I was almost 5 years cancer-free, and I got the diagnosis in 2020. So for me too, it was right. I got the surgery right before the shutdown of everything of COVID. And it was really disbelief for me. I couldn't believe that. I was like, what? Good God, a second can I mean, you know, how much can God give me to handle? Because um I'm a caregiver. That's not my profession, but I have a son that has had a lot of special needs. And even my dog has special needs. It's like, so I'm a caregiver. So when I went through my cancer treatments, I mean, I really have not processed anything after the fact, because I'm just like, I was very practical about it. I figured out what the treatment was, what I had to do. And for my son's sake, I reassured him that I'm going to be fine. I know what I have to do. I'm just going to get through it. I'm going to be fine. I'm at stage 1, totally treatable. So, it was always just, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? What do I have to do? And I never looked back. I never really stopped to acknowledge everything. Last July, I had another scare. They found 2 new lumps. And so I had biopsies again last July. So I was terrified. And thankfully, they were, not cancer. They were benign. So I don't know. I think I just, and physically, I feel like tightness and pain on the left side where I had the radiation, and I get some nerve pain. So I get some shooting kind of nerve pain in there sometimes. So every time I feel that, I have a little bit of panic, like, oh no, what's happening? Is that something growing again? And I stop myself. I just stop myself from going down that rabbit hole. Um, but I really have not processed. You know, I just feel like, okay, I'm strong. I'm a survivor. I've been through 2, and I just keep going, and I'm still caregiving for my son, and but I really don't. Yeah, I really haven't processed through this myself.
And I know many women just like you who power through it. I'm tough. I've survived this. I got through that. Um, and sometimes that will just continue to work. And sometimes there's a lot of emotional energy that it takes to keep those feelings from continually coming up, you know.
Yes, I think
And
that's my case. Like
it
it'll
takes a toll. It might seem okay in
yeah,
the beginning, and then it takes a toll on your
yep,
nervous system and produces the stress, which is why even not just psychologically, and I'm not going to say stress causes cancer. We know biology contributes to cancer, but it's really about stress affects your quality of life, and what we're talking about is quality of life. So having the space to acknowledge that in a supportive environment can be really helpful. So thanks for sharing that, May. And
thank you.
Leanne.
Thank you so much for hosting this. I know I got in a few minutes late and so maybe missed some introductions. Um, I am in the Chicago area, and resonate with some of the experiences already shared. I was diagnosed in December 2020, so also went through treatment in the pandemic, but a different place, and nearing 5 years, no evidence of disease, and thinking about whether I do have had ER positive cancer, and so thinking about continuing or not on aromatase inhibitors. But I was diagnosed at 42, and so it was definitely an existential crisis, especially going on in the midst of the pandemic. It was like sort of twofold at the same time. And I really resonate with the transitions that you set out, and I haven't heard them framed that way before. And I think what happened to me is I resonate to like put in survivorship. You don't really feel like, yeah, what's going on in the medical system not helping. And a few months after I'd finished treatment, I also developed lymphedema, and that became life consuming. So now it's like, so I have no evidence of disease, but I spend 2 hours a day managing my lymphedema. Now, what is my life? And I ended up going into that liminal space that you talked about. And I initially had gone back to work, and then I requested, I'm in education, so I requested a 1-year unpaid leave because no one could figure out how else to do it. And I feel really fortunate that my partner and I were in a position where we felt like we could. But it was surprising to me how much I had to work to like fight to give myself that liminal space. But I also felt so overwhelmed that like there was no other option. And in retrospect, what I wasn't aware of, and I still remember being on the phone with a nurse because my work was saying, but you're asking for this unpaid leave for medical reasons. Like we need medical proof. And I'm like, well, there had already been all these issues with leaves. And I'm like, I don't have a surgery. I don't have anything else coming up. Like, I don't know how it's going to work, but I will try one more time. And I remember getting mad and crying on the phone and saying, I don't care what this is. My employer is just asking you to fill out this paperwork one more time. You know, I don't care what comes of it because I'm taking an unpaid leave otherwise, or I'm resigning from my position. So I get that time off. But they put on there, I saw later, like due to the psychological consequences of cancer. And long story short, I think I went on the leave in July, and it took a long time for my employer to figure out. And so I started on an unpaid leave. But by December, when everything had gotten processed, I got transitioned to long-term disability and back paid. And part of that was the lymphedema. But nobody like told me or explained to me like these are possibilities. And I didn't, know to try, but in retrospect, it was like one of the best decisions I made in my life. And I took that year off, and I did a lot of just creating that space for myself and journaling and doing all of that inner work. And during that time too, and a little before that, there's a local organization where I got involved in a support group with women. I didn't really do much individual counseling, but I also got connected with some other organizations where I felt like I got community and space to do this kind of work like you're talking about on the retreat. And I felt like it's not like I don't have fear. I had a mammogram in December, and I still notice myself edgy, the weeks coming up and waiting for that notice to come, and my heart pounding when I see the number coming on my phone, and I know that my results haven't been posted in my portal yet, but it ends up being just a reminder call for an appointment. But my mind's going to, they're calling instead of just posting it. So that's not good.
Those are triggers, all of those. Yeah.
Right. So it's not that I don't, but I also feel like taking that time and being in that liminal space, like you talked about, I I have been able to get to that third space, and there is less fear and less triggers in that space. And yeah, it feels so much more manageable. But I did feel very much alone. I think two organizations that helped me. One is, I think, out of California, Healing Circles Global, if you Google them. And I got trained to be a host in Healing Circles. They have Living with Cancer Healing Circles. And so that's a way I still stay connected, is every other week I'm still with cancer survivors doing those circles. And then I also got involved in an organization, if there's any other women on here under 50, there's a foundation, Rising Above Foundation, started by a stage 4 cancer thriver, Jillian Lachota. And she offers different webinars and different at really low cost, reasonable resources, like gatherings and things with women and it's really designed for after in survivorship. And actually with them, one of the things we did is we wrote an anthology last year. So there were 11 of us survivors, and that was also a healing experience. Who wrote a chapter about our experiences. So yeah, so yeah, if anyone's wondering, it's a lot of work, and I didn't know how much work it took to, like, even my partner at first wasn't supportive, you know.
And that's a whole area.
It's hard.
Yeah, and the caregiver dynamics, partners, family,
right? But even now, he would say, that was so good you did that, right? So
well,
yeah.
thank you for sharing that, Leanne. That's really encouraging, reassuring, and I really appreciate that. It reminds me of I was reading many books written by cancer survivors, also in anticipation of creating the workshop, and the one that's coming up in the spring. And one of the books that I read, which I thought was one of the best ones, and I don't know if anyone on here has read it, but it's called Between Two Kingdoms.
Yes. We did a book club in Rising Above on that one. That is a fabulous book.
Great book.
Yeah.
And really emphasizes how the writing, microjournaling, even 5 minutes a day is really helpful in therapy.
Yeah. And
So,
Kelly Turner's Radical Remission is, I think, another good.
And we can put together a reading list too, because I have a bunch of things. So, Bodor, what's our where are we in this?
So I think there were a couple of other questions that I had, but maybe one that I can ask you to discuss is, why is letting go important, and what tools can people use to facilitate this? And then maybe just, also talk about, you know, defining your next chapter.
Sure, we can dive into that a bit, but what also occurs to me is, maybe we do this more than this. Maybe we do this again. Do
Oh,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? If people are interested, in coming back together, and that's a possibility that I'm open to. But to your point, so one of the things that people have found very helpful is to do what we call an energy audit. And it's a very simple thing, start by make a circle and just make a pie, with slices. Like, how much time do you spend? If you take a typical day, how much time do you spend doing any medical things? How much time do you spend caretaking others? How much time do you spend for work? How much time do you spend exercising? How much time do you spend in nature? Whatever the ways you spend your time. But do that for how you're spending your time now. And then take a look at that and think about and hold that, and write down. And then there's a parallel exercise, which is about identifying your values, because our values often change. And so in the workshop, we have like a list of different values, and we have people go through a process that will help them identify like their top 5 or top 3 values. And then we have them look at how well are your values now aligned with how you spend your time. And we get people to think about and talk about, um, and they break up in partners and then come back in group. But, what are the things that you're doing now that deplete you from energy? So we talk about, and then there's another worksheet that's about, here are the things that give me energy. Like when I see these people, have more energy. I feel good. When I see this person, and we all have people in our lives, and it doesn't mean somebody's a bad person, but sometimes there's people that are draining or counterproductive. And um and identifying what's energy depleting versus energy giving. And then we ask people to draw that pie chart again of an ideal version of how you would like to spend your time. And and then we also have a letting go ritual. Because rituals are really important. Our brains need rituals to kind of concretize and as a milestone and a turning point. And we have ritual like a letting go rituals, and it can be people writing things on paper and putting it in fire, but something that really defines the moment of change. And then this becomes a springboard to examining, purpose and the next chapter. It starts with how you want to spend your time. It takes into account what your current values are, how they're aligned with, how you're spending your time in the future. And then it comes with, a great deal of processing and journaling to think about. And there's an exercise, and it's a common one. I'm also an executive coach, and I use this a lot to help people in their professional lives, which is what's an ideal future exercise where you walk people through. Imagine it's 3 years from now, and it's a perfect day, and it's your ideal best day you can imagine. Start at the beginning. I wake up. Well, where are you? I get dressed. What are you wearing? Where do you go? You get in your car, you go here, you do this, you're with these people. And again, it's a process of working through that, but it's helping people visualize the future that they want, and then making intentional plans and making commitments, including in a group of people where we're committing to each other. I want to do more of this. I want to be able to start by sitting for 5 minutes a day and trying to meditate for 5 minutes a day. But having goals that are achievable is really important. So we kind of work through starting with the identity, what's been stripped away, what's different. We go into the whole meaning work, and that there's a lot of literature on this and how you derive meaning. And I'll give you just one example that comes out of existential philosophy. Some of you may have heard of or read work by Viktor Frankl, who is a psychiatrist in the 1940s, and he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. I remember reading this in college, and I read it again recently. And he was a psychiatrist who was sent to the Nazi concentration camps in the 40s, and he survived the camps, but psychologically survive, he um, kind of became somebody who was taking care of other people. Like he had to find meaning to actually live through this experience, because so many people died because they gave up too. Other people for other reasons, obviously. And there's a quote that is something about, I'm not gonna, let's see if I have it here handy. No, I'll send it out, but it's a quote about we can't, and it'll sound familiar from so many different worlds, but it's like, we might not be able to choose what happens to us, but he talks about the last of human freedoms is to choose what you do with that, and to choose your attitude and how you respond to what happens. And he talks in that book, which is a very thin book, about that. And out of that came a whole field of psychology called meaning therapy, and somebody named William Breitbart I don't know if Remelt Coffee's psychologist or psychiatrist developed this whole form of therapy specifically for people with cancer, which is developing meaning. And it's not to say, oh, cancer's a gift or cancer's a teacher. I mean, frankly, maybe there's wisdom that comes from it, but nobody would sign up for this class if cancer's a teacher. So, but it's still, what meaning can we derive from the experience, and how does it change us, and how do we want to live our lives? And that's what this work is about in a nutshell. It's hard to characterize the exercises and so forth, but at least it gives you a flavor and for it. And we can suggest some additional readings and so forth to give you information about the workshop and other opportunities to dive into it a bit more. And I love that, people are putting resources into the chat. That's great.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Well, I mean, thank you for Caryn for really an impactful seminar today, and was really happy to also and grateful for all of you who shared your stories. I know they're deeply personal. We will definitely give you information. We will gather some resources, and that's a great idea for books to read. And Leanne, thank you for sharing some of those as well. We'll gather all of those and send that information out to the broader group. Um, I don't know. We'll also send out the workshop that Caryn will be leading with Chuck in April in Santa Fe for all of those who may be interested, or maybe you know somebody who is interested. I think you can freely share, right, the information
Yeah,
to anybody
yeah.
who is. It doesn't have to be a breast cancer survivor. It could be
Anyone
any
who's had
survivor.
cancer. And I'll just say on that, we're updating the website for the workshop. It'll probably be updated this week. So it might not be it'll be later this week that we'll send out that information. And then um, on Friday, a podcast drops where Chip Conley and I are interviewing each other, me about his cancer experience and him about like this kind of psychological existential work. It's a free podcast. You find it under Modern Elder Academy. We can share the link for it once it drops. I have to say, I mean, to put this in context, I'm really nervous about it because I hate listening to myself. Anything like I never play these things back for myself because I'm very self-critical, but um, it was a very intense conversation, and he really opened up. We both opened up, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be a very impactful podcast for people because he's pretty amazing person who's going through this himself.
Yeah, we'll get that information out there as well. And then usually we post these webinars to our website. Does anybody have anything, is anybody opposed? We can try to maybe clip things out and not post the whole thing today. Is anybody opposed to posting today's webinar with all the other webinars we've posted? Is there any, because I know we had some personal moments. Okay. Um, It'll take us about a week or so to get it ready. If you change your mind, just please send me an email and I will make sure we can clip out anything that you would have said, and we can respect your privacy if you choose that. But with that, I think just want to say again, thank you to all of you for being here and for your support in our study. This can't happen without you. I mean, this research that's translational in nature, that's meant to solve problems that are directly relevant to you, can't happen without you. And we're super grateful for it doesn't matter how much money in the world we get to do our research, without your support, we can't do it. So thank you so much. And of course, thank you to Dr. Lerman for being here today. I mean, it touched all of us. I know also resonated with me for, my personal journey in cancer. And we definitely want to take you up on your offer to come back and
Mhm.
do this again.
I'd love to. We can even take one piece of it and do some of the exercises together if people want. Also, if I could just give people my email and offer if you want to reach out to me personally directly, it's C Lerman
You want to just type it in the chat, Karen?
Oh, yeah, that would make sense, right?
And we can also share that email as well,
Okay,
with others but this is a nice sized group.
there you go.
Yeah.
And it was a real pleasure for me. This is my passion work and part of why I want to step down from the very transactional job of being an administrator and do more of this people connection work. So anyway, thank all of you for being here and for sharing. It was really meaningful for me too. And thank you, Bodor, for creating this incredible forum and bringing people together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend and stay warm if you're in that polar
Mhm.
vortex region. And we will see you again next month. Stay on the lookout for our next webinar, and we'll give you more information in the next couple of weeks about it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.